Captain Jake Miller stood in his ship's command center, looking at the strange message on his screen. The words made no sense to him. He read them again, hoping they would become clearer the second time. Humans may enter the court assembly without weapons or protection gear. All other species must remove such items before entering. Jake scratched his head and called for his security chief. "Lisa, can you come here for a minute?" Lieutenant Lisa Brooks walked over, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. She was a tough woman who had seen many battles, but she looked confused when she read the message. "Sir, this doesn't make sense," Lisa said. "Why would humans be different? Every other species has to give up their weapons and shields, even the peaceful ones." Jake nodded. The message had come from something called the Galactic Court Assembly. He had heard of it before, but humans rarely got invited. It was a place where the oldest and most powerful alien species solved big problems. "Look at this part." Jake pointed to another line. "It says we're invited to judge a mining dispute between two alien groups. But why us? We're new to space compared to most aliens." The ship's communication system made a beeping sound. Jake pressed a button and a hologram appeared in front of them. It was an alien unlike any Jake had seen before. The creature was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to shine in the light. Its eyes were large and completely black. "I am Judge Counselor Zethka of the Vorthan people," the alien said. Its voice was deep and seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Captain Miller, your species has been chosen for this task because of an old agreement, one that most species have forgotten." Jake stepped forward. "What kind of agreement? We don't have any records of deals with the court assembly." The alien's expression was hard to read, but Jake thought he saw something like sadness in those black eyes. "Your people will understand when you arrive at Nexus Prime. The court station waits for you. Come quickly, Captain. Time is important." The hologram faded away, leaving Jake and Lisa alone with more questions than answers. "Sir, I don't like this," Lisa said. "Something feels wrong. Why won't he tell us about this agreement?" Jake walked to the big window that showed the stars outside. His ship, the Starwind, was not the biggest or strongest human vessel, but it was fast and had a good crew. They had been exploring a quiet part of space when the message arrived. "Get our diplomatic team ready," Jake said. "We'll need Karen Hayes and Dr. Ryan Clark for this." Lisa nodded and left to find the others. Jake stayed by the window, thinking about the strange message. He had been in space for 10 years, ever since humans first learned how to travel between stars. In that time, he had met many alien species. Some were friendly, others were not, but all of them seemed to know things about the galaxy that humans did not. Karen Hayes arrived first. She was the ship's main diplomat, a woman who could talk to almost anyone and make them feel comfortable. She had long brown hair and always wore a calm expression, even when things got dangerous. "Jake, what's this about a court assembly?" Karen asked as she sat down at the meeting table. "We're not sure yet," Jake replied. "But apparently, humans have some special privilege there. We can enter without weapons while everyone else has to give theirs up." Dr. Ryan Clark walked in just as Jake finished speaking. Ryan was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms. He was young but very smart, and he always carried a tablet computer where he wrote down everything he learned about new species. "That's interesting," Ryan said, already taking notes on his tablet. "Most alien cultures are very careful about weapons and protection. They've been fighting wars in space for thousands of years. For them to trust any species enough to let them keep weapons, that's huge." Karen leaned forward. "Or maybe it's not about trust. Maybe there's another reason." Jake explained about the message and the strange alien who had contacted them. He told them about the mining dispute they were supposed to help solve and the mysterious agreement that the judge counselor had mentioned. "I've studied dozens of alien cultures," Ryan said, "but I've never heard of the Vorthan people. If they're part of the court assembly, they must be very old and very powerful." "How long until we reach Nexus Prime?" Karen asked. Jake checked his navigation computer. 3 days at maximum speed. Lisa is already getting the crew ready. The next 3 days passed slowly. Jake spent most of his time reading everything he could find about the Galactic Court Assembly. There wasn't much information in human databases. Most of what he found were stories and rumors from other species. The court assembly was supposedly neutral ground, where the oldest alien civilizations met to solve problems that could affect the whole galaxy. It was located on a massive space station called Nexus Prime, built thousands of years ago by species that no longer existed. Ryan spent his time studying the few records humans had about weapons policies in alien cultures. He found something interesting. "Jake, look at this," Ryan said on the second day. "Almost every alien species has stories about ancient enemies that could sense weapons and hostile intentions. They call them different names, but the descriptions are similar. Creatures that fed on fear and aggression." "You think that's connected to the weapons policy?" Jake asked. "Maybe. If these creatures were real, it would explain why aliens are so careful about bringing weapons to important places." On the third day, they arrived at Nexus Prime. Jake had seen pictures of big space stations before, but nothing had prepared him for this. The station was enormous, bigger than some moons. It was made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Sir, we're getting docking instructions," Lisa reported from her station. As they got closer, Jake could see ships from dozens of different species docked around the station. Some were sleek and beautiful, others looked like they were grown rather than built. All of them were much larger and more advanced than the Starwind. "Look at the docking bay they're sending us to," Karen said, pointing at her screen. Jake looked and felt surprised. The bay was near the center of the station, in what looked like the most important section. Usually, newer species like humans were given spots on the outer edges. "They're treating us like we're important," Ryan observed. "But why?" As the Starwind docked, Jake watched alien crews moving around the station through the windows. He noticed something strange. Many of them looked nervous, even scared. Their body language was easy to read, even across species. They were afraid of something. "Lisa, make sure our weapons are secure but accessible," Jake said. "I want to be ready for anything." "Yes, sir." "Should the crew arm themselves?" Jake thought for a moment. The message had been clear about humans being allowed to keep weapons, but he didn't want to look threatening. "Light weapons only, and keep them hidden. We're here as diplomats, not soldiers." As they prepared to leave the ship, Jake wondered what they would find in the court assembly. The mystery of why humans were different from other species was about to be solved, but he had a feeling the answer would bring more questions than answers. Jake walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime with his team. The station was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were made of the same dark metal as the outside, and strange symbols glowed softly along the edges. The air felt heavy, and every sound seemed to echo longer than it should. "The architecture is fascinating," Ryan whispered as he took pictures with his tablet. "These corridors are designed to make visitors feel small and overwhelmed." Karen nodded, but she looked troubled. "I've been to diplomatic meetings on dozens of worlds, but I've never felt anything like this. It's like the station itself is trying to intimidate us." Jake noticed something else that bothered him. As they walked toward the assembly hall, they passed many groups of aliens heading in the same direction. Every single group looked terrified. A group of insect-like creatures called Thyrex scuttled past them. Their 6 legs moved quickly, and their antennae kept twitching. Jake had met Thyrex before, and they were usually calm and confident. These ones looked like they wanted to run away. "Look at their body language," Lisa said quietly. "They're scared out of their minds." Next, they saw a delegation of Sorok, large reptilian beings known for their warrior culture. The Sorok were famous for never backing down from a fight, but these ones had their scales changed to dark colors, which Jake knew was a sign of fear in their species. "This is really strange," Ryan said, making notes on his tablet. "I'm seeing fear responses from species that are naturally brave. Some of these aliens have fought in wars for centuries. Even stranger were the Zephyrite, crystalline beings who usually showed no emotion at all. Their bodies were making high-pitched sounds that hurt to listen to." Ryan checked his tablet and looked surprised. "Those sounds are distress calls," he said. "Zephyrite only make those noises when they think they're going to die." Jake stopped walking and looked around. Everywhere he looked, he saw aliens who were obviously terrified. Some were shaking, others were making nervous sounds, and a few looked like they might run away at any moment. "Are we missing something?" Jake asked his team. "Why is everyone so scared?" Karen shook her head. "I feel curious about this place, maybe a little excited. But scared? No." "Same here," Lisa said. "I'm being careful because it's a new situation, but I'm not afraid." Ryan was busy studying the aliens around them. "This is incredible. I'm seeing fear responses from over 20 different species, but we're not feeling anything unusual." They continued toward the assembly hall. The corridors became wider and taller as they got closer to their destination. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter and the air felt even heavier. When they finally reached the entrance to the assembly hall, Jake stopped to stare. The doors were massive, at least 50 feet tall, and covered in carvings that seemed to move in the dim light. 2 guards stood beside the entrance, but they weren't like any guards Jake had seen before. The guards were wearing full body armor that covered them completely. They didn't move or speak, and Jake couldn't even tell what species they were. When other aliens approached the doors, the guards would gesture for them to stop and remove their weapons and protective gear. Jake watched as a group of Krathan warriors, some of the toughest fighters in the galaxy, nervously removed their bio-armor and energy weapons. Their hands were shaking as they placed their equipment in storage containers. One of them was breathing so hard that Jake could hear it from 20 feet away. "Sir, should we wait in line?" Lisa asked. Before Jake could answer, one of the guards turned toward them. The guard's helmet had no visible eyes or face, just a smooth, black surface. It gestured for them to approach. Jake walked up to the guard, expecting to be asked to remove his sidearm and Lisa's weapons. Instead, the guard simply stepped aside and motioned for them to enter. "We can just go in?" Karen asked, confused. The guard nodded once, then returned to its position. Jake looked back at the line of aliens still removing their weapons. Many of them were staring at the humans with expressions of shock and confusion. "Well, this confirms the message we received," Jake said. "Humans really are treated differently here." They walked through the massive doors into the assembly hall. Jake had to stop and catch his breath when he saw the inside. The hall was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above them. Thousands of seats were arranged in a circle around a central platform, and most of them were filled with aliens from across the galaxy. The atmosphere inside the hall was even more oppressive than the corridors. Jake felt like he was standing inside a storm cloud. The air seemed to press down on him from all sides, and every shadow looked deeper and darker than it should. But what shocked him most was the behavior of the aliens in the seats. Every single one of them looked like they were fighting the urge to run away. Some were gripping their seats so hard that Jake could see their knuckles turning white. Others were making soft whimpering sounds. "This is impossible," Ryan whispered. "Look at that delegation from the Confederation of Minds. They're telepathic beings who can control their emotions perfectly, but they're terrified." Jake saw where Ryan was pointing. The Confederation delegates were usually known for their calm, logical approach to everything. Now they were huddled together like frightened children. A voice echoed through the hall, coming from everywhere at once. "The human delegation will take the central platform." Jake looked around and saw that every alien in the hall was staring at them. Thousands of eyes from dozens of species, all focused on the 4 humans walking calmly through their midst. As they made their way to the platform, Jake heard whispers in many different languages. He couldn't understand most of them, but he caught a few words that had been translated into human languages before: impossible, how, and immune. They reached the platform, and Jake saw Judge Counselor Zeth Ka standing at a tall podium. The Vorthan's black eyes were fixed on Jake, and there was something in that gaze that made Jake feel like he was being studied. "Humans of Earth," Zeth Ka said, his voice carrying easily through the massive hall. "You stand in a place where few beings can maintain their composure, yet you show no fear, no distress. Tell me, Captain Miller, what do you feel in this hall?" Jake thought about the question. "Curiosity, mostly. The architecture is impressive, and I'm interested in learning about this place. But fear? No, I don't feel afraid." A collective gasp went up from the assembled aliens. Some of them looked at the humans like they were seeing impossible creatures. "Remarkable," Zethka said. After all these millennia, to see beings who can stand in this place without terror. He paused and looked around the hall. Perhaps it is time for the truth to be revealed. The judge counselor raised his hand and the hall fell completely silent. Even the whispers stopped. We are gathered here today not for a simple mining dispute, Zethka announced. We are here because something old and terrible has begun to stir, something that our ancestors thought was gone forever. Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but not from fear, from anticipation. Whatever was happening here was bigger than a diplomatic mission. The humans will learn why their species alone can enter this hall bearing arms, Zethka continued. And perhaps, if we are fortunate, they will help us face what is coming. The massive hall erupted in nervous chatter from thousands of aliens. Jake looked at his team and saw his own confusion reflected in their faces. I think we're about to learn something very important, Karen said quietly. And probably very dangerous, Lisa added. Ryan was already taking notes. Whatever this is about, it's connected to why all these aliens are so scared. We need to pay close attention. Jake nodded and prepared to listen. The mystery of human privilege in the court assembly was about to be solved, but he was starting to suspect that the answer would change everything. The assembly hall buzzed with nervous energy as Judge Counselor Zethka prepared to speak. Jake could see aliens shifting in their seats, many of them looking like they wanted to leave but couldn't bring themselves to move. Before we begin, Zethka announced, let us address the matter that was listed in your invitations. The mining rights dispute between the Kalari Collective and the Thresh Commonwealth. A hologram appeared above the central platform, showing a small asteroid field. Jake recognized it as a typical resource conflict, the kind that human diplomats had helped solve before. The Kalari claim historical rights to this system, Zethka continued. The Thresh argue that their people discovered it first. Captain Miller, your species has been asked to mediate this dispute. Please present your recommendation. Jake stepped forward, grateful for familiar ground. After reviewing the evidence, we recommend splitting the mining rights based on the resource distribution. The Kalari can mine the outer asteroids rich in rare metals, while the Thresh focus on the inner asteroids with energy crystals. Both groups get what they need most. The solution was simple and fair. Jake had seen similar disputes resolved this way many times. But instead of the usual discussions and negotiations, something unexpected happened. A young Krathan warrior in the front row suddenly stood up, his massive frame shaking with anger. Why should we listen to these humans? He shouted. They don't understand anything about our galaxy. The warrior's name was Hex Tull, according to the translation device. He was young for a Krathan, probably equivalent to a human teenager, and he was clearly scared despite his angry words. They walk into this place like they own it. Hex Tull continued, his voice getting louder. They carry weapons where the rest of us cannot. They show no proper respect for the power that dwells beneath our feet. The moment the words left his mouth, Hex Tull's face changed. He looked horrified, like he had just revealed a terrible secret. Every other alien in the hall went completely silent. Judge Counselor Zethka closed his black eyes and sighed deeply. Young Hex Tull has spoken words that were meant to remain hidden. Perhaps this is fate telling us that the time for secrets has ended. What power beneath our feet? Jake asked. He felt his team move closer to him, all of them alert and ready for whatever was coming. Zethka looked around the hall at all the terrified aliens. Captain Miller, your people have wondered why you alone can enter this hall with weapons. Why you alone show no fear in this place. The answer lies in a history that most species have tried to forget. The judge counselor raised his hand and the floor beneath the platform became transparent. Jake looked down and saw something that made no sense. Far below, embedded in the rock foundation of the station, was the skeleton of a massive creature. It was easily the size of a small moon, with bones that seemed to absorb light. This is the remains of a devourer, Zethka said, his voice heavy with old sadness. One of the most terrible predators our galaxy has ever known. Ryan immediately started taking notes, his scientific mind engaged despite the frightening implications. What exactly is a devourer? Creatures from the dark spaces between galaxies, Zethka explained. They hunt civilizations by feeding on fear, anger, and aggression. The more terrified their prey, the stronger they become. They can sense hostile intentions from vast distances, drawn to worlds and species that harbor violence. Karen stepped forward. You're saying this dead creature is why everyone here is scared? Not just scared, Zethka corrected. Every species in this galaxy, except yours, carries the genetic memory of the Devourer Wars. Our ancestors fought these creatures for thousands of years. Those who survived did so by developing an instinctive fear response to their presence. Jake looked around the hall and finally understood. The aliens aren't scared of the architecture or the station. They're scared of that thing down there. Even dead, it leaves in psychic residue, Zethka confirmed. Every alien who enters this hall feels their ancestors' terror. It is overwhelming, almost unbearable. That is why we must remove all weapons before entering. The instinct to fight makes the fear worse, and the fear feeds the residue, creating a cycle that can drive beings mad. Lisa frowned. But we don't feel anything unusual. Just curiosity. Exactly, Zethka said, and for the first time, Jake heard something like hope in the ancient being's voice. Humans evolved on a world that was somehow isolated from the Devourer Wars. Your species has no genetic memory of these creatures. You feel no instinctive terror in their presence. Ryan was connecting pieces in his mind. That's why the weapons restriction doesn't apply to us. We don't get scared, so we don't feed the psychic residue. But there's more, Zethka continued. If humans feel no fear of dead devourers, it suggests you might also be immune to living ones. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop several degrees. Jake saw aliens throughout the hall begin to shake even more violently. Living ones? Jake asked, though he was starting to suspect he didn't want to hear the answer. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected something moving in the void between galaxies, something large and ancient, heading toward our sector of space. A new hologram appeared, showing a map of their local star cluster. A red dot was moving, slowly but steadily toward the center, where dozens of inhabited systems clustered together. A devourer ship, Zethka said simply. We believe it has been sleeping in the dark for millions of years, but something has awakened it. Perhaps the psychic resonance of this very assembly, where representatives from hundreds of species gather regularly. Jake felt his team tense around him. This was no longer a diplomatic mission. This was a potential extinction event. How long before it arrives? Karen asked. Based on its current speed, approximately 6 days. What happened the last time one of these things attacked? Jake asked. Zethka was quiet for a long moment. 17 species were completely destroyed before we found a way to stop it. The cost was terrible. How did you stop it? Sacrifice, the judge counselor said. Volunteers from multiple species flew ships directly into the creature, using their own deaths to disrupt its feeding. But that was when we had vast fleets and billions of soldiers willing to die for their people. Jake looked around the hall at the terrified aliens. And now? Now, most species barely have enough ships to defend their own worlds. If we tried the same strategy, we would only feed the creature more fear and violence, making it stronger. Ryan had been studying his tablet while they talked. There's something else, isn't there? You didn't invite us here just to tell us about this threat. Zethka nodded slowly. You are correct, Dr. Clark. We invited humans here because ancient records suggest that devourers can only be truly defeated by beings who approach them without fear or aggression. Beings who see them as puzzles to be solved rather than enemies to be destroyed. You want us to fight this thing? Lisa asked. Not fight, Zethka corrected. Understand, the last time a devourer was truly defeated rather than simply stopped, it was done through communication and understanding, not violence. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. You're asking 4 humans to save the galaxy from a creature that destroyed 17 entire species. I am asking 4 humans to try something that no other species can attempt, Zethka replied. To approach the incomprehensible with curiosity instead of terror. The hall erupted in discussion, as aliens debated among themselves in dozens of languages. Jake could hear fear and desperation in their voices regardless of what language they spoke. "We need more information," Jake said finally. "Everything you know about these creatures, their behavior, their weaknesses." "Of course," Zethka agreed. "But know this, Captain Miller. Time is short, and if you cannot find a solution, every species in this sector of the galaxy will face extinction." Jake looked at his team. Karen appeared thoughtful, already planning diplomatic strategies. Lisa was calculating military options. Ryan was excited by the scientific challenge, despite the danger. "We'll need access to your historical databases," Jake said, "and we'll need to coordinate with our ship and the rest of the human fleet." "Anything you require will be provided," Zethka promised. As the assembly began to break up with aliens hurrying away to prepare their species for the coming crisis, Jake remained on the platform with his team. "Sir, what are you thinking?" "Lisa," asked Jake, looked down at the massive skeleton beneath their feet, then up at the thousands of fleeing aliens. "I'm thinking that we're about to find out what humans are really capable of when the entire galaxy is counting on us." The mystery of human privilege had been solved, but now they faced a much bigger challenge. In 6 days, they would need to do something that had never been done before: face a cosmic predator with nothing but curiosity and hope. Jake spent the next 2 days buried in ancient records that Judge Counselor Zethka had provided. The archives contained thousands of years of information about the Devourer Wars, written in languages so old that they required special translation programs to understand. "This is incredible," Ryan said, looking up from his tablet. They had set up a temporary research station in one of Nexus Prime's libraries. These creatures weren't originally evil. According to the oldest records, they were some kind of cosmic gardeners helping young civilizations grow and develop. Karen leaned over to read Ryan's screen. "What changed them?" "War," Ryan replied. "When species started fighting each other across the galaxy, the Devourers tried to stop the violence by feeding on aggressive emotions. But over time, that diet corrupted them. They became addicted to fear and anger." Jake rubbed his tired eyes. He had been reading for hours about failed attempts to communicate with Devourers. Most species that tried to talk to them were destroyed immediately. The creatures would sense their fear and attack before any real communication could happen. Lisa walked into the library carrying a data pad with the latest reports from their ship. "Sir, I've got some bad news. The creature changed course. It's moving faster than expected." "How much time do we have?" Jake asked. 4 days, maybe less." Jake stood up and walked to the large window that showed the space around Nexus Prime. In the distance, he could see ships from dozens of species leaving the station. Most alien fleets were already retreating to their home worlds, hoping to mount defensive actions there. "Have you seen the evacuation reports?" Karen asked. "Entire star systems are emptying out. Some species are abandoning their colonies and fleeing to the far edges of the galaxy." "I don't blame them," Jake said. "If I had genetic memories of these things destroying my ancestors, I'd probably run too." Ryan joined them at the window, but running won't work this time. According to the historical data, Devourers can track fleeing ships across vast distances. The fear and panic actually draws them in that direction. Jake's communication device beeped. It was a message from his ship's captain, who had remained aboard the Starwind to coordinate with other human vessels in the area. "Captain Miller, this is Commander Pete Williams. We've received word from Earth Command. They're sending reinforcements, but the nearest human fleet is 8 days away." "Too late," Jake said into the device. "What about local human ships?" "We've got 3 vessels. Total, sir. The Starwind, the cargo ship Northern Light, and the research vessel Discovery. Maybe 40 people willing to stay and help." Jake closed his eyes and thought about those numbers. 40 humans against a creature that had destroyed 17 entire species. The odds were impossible. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "maybe we should consider evacuation too." Jake looked at his team. All 3 of them were scared. He could see it in their eyes. But they were still thinking, still planning, still hoping to find a solution. That was the difference between humans and the other species. Humans got scared, but they didn't let fear stop them from moving forward. No, Jake said finally. If we run, everyone dies eventually. This thing will keep hunting until it's consumed every inhabited world in the galaxy. We're the only ones who might be able to stop it. Judge Counselor Zeth Ka entered the library, moving with the slow grace of his ancient species. Captain Miller, our long-range sensors have detected something new. The Judge Counselor activated a holographic display that showed the approaching Devourer ship. Jake had seen pictures of it before, but seeing it in real time was different. The vessel was massive, easily the size of a small moon, and it seemed to be made of both metal and living tissue. Parts of it pulsed like a heartbeat. It's beautiful, in a terrible way, Karen whispered. The creature is broadcasting something, Zeth Ka continued. Our experts believe it might be attempting communication. Ryan's eyes lit up with excitement. Can we hear it? Zeth Ka pressed a control, and the library filled with a sound unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was like music, but wrong somehow. The melody was haunting and sad with the underlying tones that made Jake's skin crawl. Our specialists have analyzed the transmission, Zeth Ka explained. They believe it contains patterns that affect the brain's fear centers. Any species with genetic memories of devourers becomes paralyzed when they hear it. But we don't feel paralyzed, Jake said. It's strange and unsettling, but we can still think. Exactly. Which confirms our theory about human immunity. Ryan was already recording the transmission and taking notes. This isn't random noise. There's definitely a pattern here, like it's trying to say something. Karen stood up and walked closer to the holographic display. What if it's not trying to threaten anyone? What if this is its way of calling for help? Help? Zeth Ka asked, his black eyes focusing on Karen. Think about it, Karen continued. If these creatures were originally benevolent and they only became corrupted by feeding on negative emotions, maybe this one is trying to break free from that corruption. Jake felt a spark of hope. You're suggesting that the creature might want to change? It's possible, Karen said. In my diplomatic experience, aggression is usually a sign of pain or fear. What if this devourer is in pain? Lisa shook her head. Sir, with respect, that thing destroyed 17 species. Even if it's in pain, it's still incredibly dangerous. You're both right, Jake said. It's dangerous, but it might also be our only chance to end this cycle permanently. Ryan looked up from his analysis. I'm seeing something interesting in the transmission pattern. Parts of it repeat every few minutes, but other parts change, like it's responding to something. Responding to what? Jake asked. I think, to us. To the fear it's detecting from fleeing ships and evacuating populations. The transmission gets more complex when there's more fear in the area. Jake felt pieces clicking together in his mind. So the creature's song changes based on the emotions it's sensing. What would happen if it sensed something different? Like what? Karen asked. Like curiosity instead of fear. Like the desire to understand rather than the need to fight or flee. Zeth Ka moved closer to the humans. You're proposing to approach the creature directly? I'm proposing to try communication, Jake said. Real communication, not the kind that's been attempted before. Every previous attempt was made by species who were terrified of devourers. What if we tried while feeling genuinely curious about it? Lisa looked worried. Sir, even if we can approach it safely, we only have 3 small ships. How do we get close enough to communicate without being destroyed? Ryan had an idea. The creature is following the psychic trail left by fleeing ships. What if we went the other direction? Instead of running away, we approach it gradually, broadcasting our own signals. What kind of signals? Jake asked. Scientific data about ourselves. Mathematical concepts, artistic expressions, maybe even music. Anything that shows intelligence and curiosity rather than fear or aggression. Karen nodded enthusiastically. It's like first contact protocols, but in reverse. Instead of waiting for them to contact us, we make the first move. Jake walked back to the window and looked out at the few remaining ships around Nexus Prime. Most of them were human vessels whose crews had volunteered to stay despite the danger. Judge Counselor, we'll need your cooperation, Jake said. Can you provide us with translation algorithms and communication equipment that might work with the creature? Of course, Zethka replied. But Captain Miller, you must understand that this has never been attempted before. We have no idea how the creature will respond to genuine curiosity. That's what makes it worth trying, Jake said. Every other approach has failed because it was based on fear and violence. Maybe it's time to try something completely different. Lisa was already making plans. I'll coordinate with Pete Williams and Amy Foster on the Northern Light. We'll need to position our ships carefully. And I'll work on the communication protocols, Ryan added. If this creature was once benevolent, there might be traces of that original nature still inside it. Karen was looking at the holographic display of the approaching ship. What if we're wrong? What if it really is just a monster now? Jake considered the question seriously. Then we'll have tried something new and learned something important, even if we don't survive to share that knowledge. As the team prepared to leave Nexus Prime, Jake took one last look at the ancient records. Somewhere in those files was the story of the last time a devourer had been truly defeated rather than simply stopped. The records were incomplete, but they mentioned something about the Song of Understanding and the Harmony of Curiosity. He hoped they would have a chance to find out what those phrases meant. Sir, Lisa said as they headed toward their ship, are you really confident about this plan? Jake smiled grimly. No, I'm terrified. But I'm also curious to see what happens when humans try to solve a problem that everyone else thinks is impossible. In less than 4 days, they would find out if human curiosity was stronger than cosmic terror. The 3 human ships moved through space in a loose formation, heading directly toward the approaching devourer. Jake stood on the bridge of the Starwind, watching the massive alien vessel grow larger on their screens. At this distance, he could see details that made his breath catch. The devourer ship was not just built, it was grown. Organic curves blended with metallic structures and parts of it pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. It was both beautiful and terrifying, like looking at a living mountain floating through space. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from evacuating fleets, reported Amy Foster from the Northern Light. They're begging us to turn back. Jake understood their fear. Every alien species in the galaxy was watching 3 tiny human ships fly towards certain death. From their perspective, it looked like suicide. Keep our communication channels open, Jake ordered. I want everyone in the galaxy to hear what happens next. Dr. Ryan Clark was working frantically at his station, analyzing the Devourer's song and preparing their response. The pattern is getting more complex as we get closer. It's definitely reacting to our presence, but not the way it reacts to fleeing ships. How is it different? Karen asked from her position at the diplomatic console. The fear-based transmissions were harsh and overwhelming, but our approach is generating something more like confusion. I think we're the first beings to voluntarily fly toward it in thousands of years. Pete Williams, commanding the cargo ship Northern Light, spoke over the communication system. Captain Miller, our sensors are picking up massive energy buildups in the creature. It's powering up what look like weapons systems. Jake felt his heart rate increase, but he kept his voice calm. Hold course, remember, we're not here to fight, we're here to understand. Lisa was monitoring their defensive systems, though Jake had ordered all weapons to remain powered down. Sir, at this range, if that thing decides to attack us, we won't have time to defend ourselves. That's the point, Jake replied. We have to show that we're not a threat. The Devourer's song filled their ships now, audible through the hull, without need for communication equipment. It was louder and more complex than anything they had heard on Nexus Prime. Jake found himself listening to the patterns, trying to understand what the creature was trying to communicate. Ryan, are you getting this? Jake asked. Yes, sir, the song is changing rapidly now. There are definitely mathematical sequences embedded in it, and what might be emotional content. Karen was studying the translation programs that Judge Counselor Zethka had provided. I'm seeing something here. The creature's transmissions aren't random. There's a call and response pattern, like it's waiting for something. Waiting for what? An answer. I think it's trying to start a conversation. Jake made a decision that would either save the galaxy or doom his crew. Ryan, Karen, I want you to compose a response. Something that shows intelligence, curiosity, and peaceful intentions. What should we say? Ryan asked. Tell it about us, about humans, about Earth, about why we're here. But make it scientific and artistic, not military. Over the next hour, as the 3 human ships continued their approach, Ryan and Karen worked together to create humanity's first message to a devourer. They included mathematical constants, musical compositions, images of Earth, and scientific data about human biology and culture. It's ready, Karen announced. Should we transmit? Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all scared, but they were also excited. This was the most important moment in human history, and they were right in the middle of it. Send it, Jake ordered. The transmission went out at the speed of light, carrying humanity's introduction to the ancient creature. For several minutes, nothing happened. The devourer continued its approach, and its song continued unchanged. Then suddenly everything changed. The creature's song stopped completely. The massive ship slowed its approach and came to a complete halt, hanging in space like a living mountain. For the first time in thousands of years, a devourer had stopped moving toward its prey. Are you getting this? Pete Williams called from the northern light. We see it, Jake replied. Ryan, what's happening? Ryan was staring at his instruments in amazement. The creature's energy patterns are completely different. Instead of aggressive postures, it's showing what I can only describe as curiosity. New transmission came from the devourer, but this one was unlike anything they had heard before. Instead of the overwhelming song that paralyzed other species, this was a gentle melody with clear mathematical patterns. It's responding, Karen said excitedly. And it's using the same mathematical constants we included in our message. Jake felt a mixture of relief and excitement. So we can communicate with it. Over the next several hours, a remarkable conversation took place between the humans and the ancient creature. Using mathematics, music, and images, they slowly began to understand each other. The devourer, which called itself something that translated roughly as the seeker of harmony, had once been exactly what the ancient records described, a benevolent entity that helped young civilizations develop. But millennia of feeding on fear and aggression had corrupted its purpose. It's in pain, Karen realized as she translated the creature's latest transmission. It remembers what it used to be, but it can't stop feeding on negative emotions. It's like an addiction. Ryan had been analyzing the creature's biological data. The interesting thing is that it still has the capacity for its original function. The corruption isn't permanent damage. It's more like a behavioral pattern that's become locked in place. Can it be changed? Jake asked. Maybe. If we can provide it with a different kind of emotional energy to feed on. Jake understood immediately. Instead of fear and aggression, we give it curiosity and wonder. Exactly. But it would have to be genuine. The creature can sense authentic emotions versus fake ones. Amy Foster called from the Northern Light. Sirs, we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Every species is watching this conversation. Some of them are starting to overcome their fear. Jake realized that their communication with the devourer was being broadcast to every inhabited world in the local sector. For the first time in thousands of years, aliens were seeing one of these creatures as something other than a destroyer. Fear is decreasing, Ryan reported. As more species become curious instead of terrified, the creature is responding positively. The transformation was gradual, but unmistakable. The devourer's ship began to change, with the harsh edges softening and the bioluminescent patterns becoming more beautiful than frightening. The creature's transmissions became more musical and less overwhelming. Judge Counselor Zeth Ka contacted them from Nexus Prime. Captain Miller, what you have accomplished is unprecedented. The creature is changing before our eyes. It's not just changing, Karen said, studying the latest transmissions. It's remembering. It's becoming what it was meant to be. The Unarmed, seeker of harmony, sent a final message to the human ships. In it, Jake could hear gratitude, wonder, and something that might have been joy. The creature was free from its corruption. able to return to its original purpose. Instead of destroying civilizations, it would help them grow. Instead of feeding on fear, it would nurture curiosity and understanding. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "I think we did it." Jake watched as the massive ship began to move away, not toward populated systems but toward the dark spaces between galaxies where other corrupted devourers might still be sleeping. "The Seeker says it's going to find others of its kind," Karen translated. "It wants to help them remember what they were meant to be." Over the following weeks, the galaxy began to change. The ancient fear of devourers was replaced by a new understanding. Species that had been enemies for centuries began to work together, inspired by what they had witnessed. Humans found themselves in a unique position. They became the galaxy's official mediators for encounters with cosmic-level phenomena, not because they were the strongest or smartest, but because they could approach the unknown with wonder instead of terror. The Court Assembly's rule about humans entering without weapons became a galaxy-wide recognition of humanity's special gift. When other species saw impossible threats, humans saw fascinating puzzles to be solved. Jake returned to Nexus Prime a hero, but he didn't feel like one. He felt like someone who had learned an important lesson about the power of curiosity over fear. "Sir," Ryan said as they docked at the station, "do you think we'll encounter more situations like this?" Jake looked out at the stars, thinking about all the mysteries still waiting to be discovered. "I hope so. The galaxy is full of wonders that are probably just misunderstood threats waiting for someone curious enough to figure them out." Karen joined them at the window. "The diplomatic implications of this are huge. Every species in the galaxy now knows that humans can do something they cannot." "What's that?" Jake asked. "Look at the impossible and see possibility instead of destruction." As Jake watched ships from dozens of species returning to Nexus Prime, no longer fleeing in terror but coming together in wonder, he realized that humanity had found its place in the galaxy. They weren't the strongest or the oldest or the wisest species, but they had something equally valuable: the ability to face the unknown with hope instead of fear, the mystery of why humans could enter the Court Assembly without